The heavy iron gates of the cemetery groaned against the wind, a sound like a dying breath that no one in the procession heard over the drumming rain. Officer Vance Harlan sat in his cruiser, watching the sea of black umbrellas with a sneer curling his lip. To anyone else, it was a somber farewell. To Harlan, it was just another unauthorized gathering in his town, an excuse to flex the badge that shone too brightly on his chest. He killed the engine. The silence inside the car was deafening before he opened the door to the storm. He adjusted his belt, feeling the familiar cold weight of his service weapon. He didn't know it yet, but the man standing at the head of that grave, tall, stoic, and draped in grief, was not a suspect. He was Major General Marcus Vale, and pointing a gun at him would be the last mistake Vance Harlan ever made as a free man. The rain in Redwood Creek didn't wash things clean. It just made the red Georgia clay stick to everything. It clung to the tires of the hearse, to the polished dress shoes of the mourners, and to the heavy heart of Major General Marcus Vale. Marcus stood as still as a statue carved from obsidian, his hands clasped behind his back in a parade rest that had been drilled into his bones over 30 years of service. He was not in uniform today. He wore a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, the fabric darkening as the drizzle seeped through the canopy of the old oak trees. Today, he wasn't a commander of thousands. He was just a big brother saying goodbye to a little brother who had gone too soon. The open grave before him looked like a wound in the earth. Inside the mahogany casket lay Elias Vale, a high school history teacher who had spent his life fighting ignorance with books rather than bullets. A heart attack at 45. It didn't seem fair. It didn't seem real. Ashes to ashes, the Reverend Ellis murmured, his voice trembling slightly against the chill wind. Dust to dust. Marcus looked around the circle of faces. There was his wife, Lena, her face buried in a handkerchief, her other hand gripping Marcus's elbow as if she were the only thing tethering him to the ground. There was his mother, elderly and frail in a wheelchair, her eyes vacant with a grief that exceeded the capacity of tears. And there were Elias's students, dozens of them, a rainbow of young faces standing respectfully in the mud, holding single white roses. It was a quiet, dignified send-off. The cemetery, Oak Haven, was situated on the outskirts of town, a place that had been segregated by law 60 years ago and was now segregated only by habit and economics. It was peaceful here, usually, but Marcus felt a prickle on the back of his neck, a sensation he hadn't felt since his last deployment in the sandbox. It was the feeling of being watched. He shifted his gaze slightly, scanning the perimeter without turning his head, a habit from his days in reconnaissance. A police cruiser was parked on the gravel access road about 50 yards away. The engine was idling. The headlights were off, but the silhouette of the driver was visible. He was watching them. Marcus exhaled slowly. He had hoped, perhaps naively, that his rank and his distance from this town would shield him from the petty indignities of his youth. He had left Redwood Creek at 18, joined the army, and climbed the ladder rung by bloodied rung. He was a 2-star general. He had briefed the president. He had negotiated with warlords. But standing here in the Georgia mud, in a civilian suit, he knew what that cop saw. He saw a group of black folks gathered in a place where they didn't belong. Or perhaps he just saw an opportunity to exert dominance. Let's focus on Elias, Marcus whispered to himself, forcing his attention back to the Reverend, but the cruiser didn't leave. The door opened. The officer who stepped out was a caricature of authority gone to seed. He was thick around the middle, his uniform straining at the buttons, his face flushed with a permanent ruddy hue that suggested high blood pressure or a temper, or both. He slammed the car door, the sound cracking like a pistol shot in the quiet cemetery. Marcus watched the man approach. He walked with a swagger, a rolling gait that took up more space than necessary. He wasn't walking like someone paying respects. He was walking like someone looking for a problem to solve. Marcus, Lena whispered, sensing the tension in his arm. Don't. I'm not doing anything, Lena, Marcus replied softly. I'm burying my brother. The officer, whose name tag read Harlan, stopped at the edge of the gathering. He didn't take off his hat. He didn't bow his head. He chewed on a piece of gum with an open mouth, the smacking sound audible even over the rain. All right, folks, Harlan said, his voice loud and grating. Let's wrap it up. Show's over. The Reverend paused mid-prayer, looking up in confusion. Officer, we are in the middle of a committal service. We have a permit. Harlan placed a hand on his belt right next to his taser. I don't care about a permit, Reverend. We got noise complaints. Neighbors say you're blocking the road, and frankly, this is a lot of cars for a private gathering. Looks like a public assembly to me. You got a permit for a parade? It was a lie. Marcus knew it was a lie. There were no neighbors for miles, just woods and a salvage yard. The road was empty. We are grieving, officer, Marcus said, his voice a deep baritone that carried authority without shouting. He turned to face the man fully. Please have some respect. We will be finished in 10 minutes. Harlan's eyes snapped to Marcus. He looked him up and down, sneering at the expensive suit, the confident posture. He didn't like it. He was used to fear. He was used to, yes, sir, and eyes on the ground. He wasn't used to a black man looking him dead in the eye with the calmness of a predator. I didn't ask you, slick, Harlan spat. I told you to wrap it up. Now move these cars or I start writing tickets. And if you give me lip, I start writing arrests. Marcus's mother let out a small, frightened whimper. That sound, the sound of his mother's fear, ignited a cold fury in Marcus's gut. But he was a general. He controlled chaos for a living. He wouldn't let a small-town bully break his composure. Officer Harlan, Marcus said, reading the name tag. I'm asking you man to man to let us finish burying my brother. Then we will leave. Harlan took a step closer, invading Marcus's personal space. The officer smelled of stale coffee and damp wool. And I'm telling you, boy, that you don't give orders here. I do. The word hung in the air, heavy and toxic. The mourners froze. The students looked terrified. Lena squeezed Marcus's arm so hard her nails dug into his skin through the suit jacket. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't blink. I suggest you return to your vehicle, officer, Marcus said. It was a command. It wasn't a request. And that was the moment Vance Harlan decided he was going to destroy this man. Vance Harlan had been a cop in Redwood Creek for 15 years. In that time, he had learned that the badge was a shield that deflected consequences. He had roughed up teenagers, planted evidence on troublemakers, and intimidated anyone who dared to file a complaint. The chief of police, a man named Chief Donovan Hale, was his brother-in-law. Harlan was untouchable, or so he thought. Standing in the rain, facing this tall stranger in the suit, Harlan felt a familiar itch. Aye, it was the itch of insecurity. This man wasn't scared. Why wasn't he scared? Harlan needed to make him scared. Fear was the currency Harlan traded in, and he was currently broke. You suggest? Harlan laughed, a harsh barking sound. You suggest? You hear that, folks? He unclipped the retention strap on his holster. The sound was a distinct click that made the Reverend gasp. You are interfering with a police investigation, Harlan lied, his voice rising. I suspect there are narcotics in those vehicles. This whole thing looks like a front for a drop. That is preposterous. Marcus said, his voice ice cold. "This is a funeral for a history teacher." "Back up!" Harlan shouted, his hand gripping the butt of his Glock. "Back the hell up!" Marcus hadn't moved. He was standing his ground, shielding his wife and mother. "I am not moving. You are escalating a non-existent situation." "I said back up!" In a motion that was too fast for the civilians to process, but unfolded in slow motion for Marcus, Harlan drew his weapon. He didn't just draw it to low ready. He didn't just hold it at his side. He raised the weapon two-handed and pointed the barrel directly at Marcus Vale's chest. Panic erupted. "Oh my God!" someone screamed. "Don't shoot him!" Lena cried out, stepping in front of Marcus. But Marcus caught her and swung her gently but firmly behind him, shielding her with his own body. "Get down!" Harlan shrieked, spit flying from his lips. "Everyone on the ground now, hands where I can see them." Marcus stared down the barrel of the gun. He could see the rifling inside. He could see the tremor in Harlan's hands. This man was undisciplined, untrained, and terrified. A terrified man with a gun is the most dangerous thing on earth. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice that had commanded battalions. "You are making a grave error. Lower your weapon." "Get on your knees!" Harlan roared, taking a step forward, the gun shaking violently. "Last warning." Marcus calculated his odds. He could disarm him. At this distance, 7 feet, Marcus could close the gap, deflect the barrel, and break the man's wrist before the trigger broke. He had taught Krav Maga to special forces. He knew how to kill a man with his bare hands in 3 seconds. But if he moved, Harlan might twitch. If Harlan twitched, a round would go off. And behind Marcus were 50 civilians, including children, including his mother. He couldn't risk it. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus raised his hands. He kept his palms open, fingers spread. "I am complying," Marcus said clearly. "I am unarmed. Everyone here is unarmed." "On your knees!" Harlan screamed, his face turning a violent shade of purple. "Get on your knees or I will drop you right here." Marcus slowly lowered himself. The mud soaked through the knees of his trousers instantly. The cold wetness seeped into his skin. It was a humiliation designed to break him, to strip him of his dignity in front of his family. "Face down," Harlan commanded, drunk on the sudden rush of power. "Eat dirt." Marcus paused. This was it, the line. "I said down." Harlan kicked Marcus in the shoulder. It wasn't a hard kick, but the disrespect of it, the sheer, unadulterated hatred, sent a shockwave through the crowd. Marcus placed his hands on the mud and lowered his chest to the ground. The smell of wet earth and worms filled his nose. He turned his head to the side, his cheek pressed against the cold clay of his brother's gravesite. He looked at his brother's casket. "I'm sorry, Elias," he thought. "I'm sorry this fool is ruining your peace." "Cuff him!" Harlan yelled at no one. He was alone. He realized he had to do it himself. "Don't you move!" Harlan growled, keeping the gun trained on Marcus's head with one hand while he fumbled for his handcuffs with the other. "You're under arrest for assaulting an officer and resisting arrest." The sheer audacity of the charge would have been funny if the situation weren't so deadly. Harlan dropped a knee into the small of Marcus's back, driving the air from his lungs. He wrenched Marcus's left arm behind him, cranking it up high near the shoulder blade. Then the right. The handcuffs ratcheted tight, too tight. The metal bit into the bone. "I got you now, big man," Harlan whispered in Marcus's ear. "Not so tough now, are you?" Harlan stood up, holstering his weapon but keeping his hand on it. He looked around the crowd, challenging anyone to speak. The mourners were weeping silently, terrified. "Anyone else want to join him?" Harlan barked. Silence. That's what I thought. Harlan grabbed Marcus by the collar of his suit jacket and hauled him up. Marcus stumbled slightly, the mud slick under his feet, but regained his balance. He stood tall despite the mud covering the entire front of his expensive suit, despite the cuffs, despite the rain washing down his face. Walk! Harlan shoved him toward the cruiser. As they reached the car, Marcus spoke. His voice was calm, terrifyingly so. Officer Harlan, Marcus said, my wallet is in my back right pocket. Inside it you will find my identification. I don't care who you are, Harlan scoffed, opening the back door of the cruiser. You're just another thug in a suit. I strongly suggest you look at it, Marcus said, before you close this door. Harlan paused. Something in Marcus's tone finally penetrated the thick fog of his ego. He hesitated. Then with a sneer, he reached into Marcus's pocket and pulled out the slim leather wallet. He flipped it open. There was no driver's license in the window. Instead, there was a military ID card, a common access card. But it wasn't the standard white one. It was different. Harlan squinted at it through the rain. Washington, Marcus L. Rank, Major General, Branch, U.S. Army. Harlan blinked. He looked at the picture, then at the man, then at the rank. Major General, 2 stars. That was high. That was really high. That was boss high in military terms. But Harlan was a civilian cop. He didn't answer to the Army. He shrugged, though a seed of doubt had been planted in his gut. So you were in the Army? Harlan grunted. Good for you. It doesn't give you the right to park illegally. He tossed the wallet onto the front seat of his car. Get in. He shoved a 2-star general into the back of a damp, cage-lined patrol car like a common drunk. He slammed the door. As Harlan walked around to the driver's seat, he didn't notice the sleek black SUV that had just pulled up silently at the cemetery gates. He didn't notice the 2 men in dark suits stepping out, watching him with binoculars. And he certainly didn't know that General Vale was never truly alone. His security detail had been respecting his wish for privacy at the funeral, holding back a mile away. But the panic button on Marcus's keychain, which he had pressed the moment the gun came out, had sent a silent alarm. Harlan put the car in drive. He thought he was taking a perp to the station. He was actually driving himself directly into hell. The ride to the Redwood Creek police station was a masterclass in petty tyranny. Vance Harlan drove with one hand on the wheel, the other tapping a rhythm on the dashboard, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror to smirk at his prisoner. You know, Harlan drawled, his eyes meeting Marcus's in the glass. You folks always think you can come into my town and do whatever you want. Park where you want, yell at officers. It's a lack of discipline. That's what it is. Major General Marcus Vale sat straight up in the back seat, despite the handcuffs biting into his wrists. The plastic seat was hard and smelled of vomit and pine cleaner. The mesh cage, separating him from Harlan, was rusted in the corners. I have not spoken a word since you arrested me, officer, Marcus said calmly. I am conserving my energy. Conserving energy? Harlan laughed. For what? The county jail. You think you're going to bench press your way out of this? You're in the system now, pal. My system. Harlan keyed his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 4. Coming in with 1 male, 10 and 15. Charges are assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, and put him down for inciting a riot. Copy that, Unit 4. The dispatcher's voice crackled, sounding bored. Marcus closed his eyes. Inciting a riot. The charges were inflating by the mile. He thought of Lena back at the gravesite. She was strong, a military wife of 30 years. She knew the drill. She wouldn't panic. She would call the number on the emergency card he made her carry in her purse. The gears were likely already turning, but the machine was vast, and it took time to spool up. They arrived at the station, a squat brick building that looked more like a bunker than a place of public service. Harlan dragged Marcus out of the car, parading him past the front windows, where a few administrative clerks looked up with mild interest. "Move it." Harlan shoved Marcus through the heavy metal door into the booking area. The station smelled of stale coffee and damp concrete. A sergeant sat behind a high desk, a man named Riggs, who looked like he was counting the minutes until retirement. "What you got, Vance?" Riggs asked, not looking up from his crossword puzzle. "Big shot," Harlan bragged, unhooking the handcuffs from his belt to lock Marcus to the processing bench. "Tried to jump me at a funeral. Had to draw down on him." Riggs looked up then, eyeing Marcus's mud-stained bespoke suit and the way he held himself. Riggs frowned. He'd seen thugs, he'd seen drunks, and he'd seen angry husbands. This man didn't look like any of them. He looked like a coiled spring. "He tried to jump you?" Riggs asked skeptically. "He's wearing a $3,000 suit," Harlan muttered. "Stolen, probably." Harlan emptied Marcus's pockets onto the counter. Keys, a handkerchief, a folded program from the funeral, and the wallet. Harlan tossed the military ID onto the counter. "Says he's a general or something. Probably fake." Riggs picked up the CAC card. He adjusted his reading glasses. He stopped chewing his gum. "Vance," Riggs said slowly, "this ain't fake. The holographic chip is real. Major General. That's a 2-star. Harlan scoffed, starting to fill out the paperwork. "So? He's probably in the reserves or something. Does 2 stars give him the right to assault me?" "Did he actually assault you?" Riggs asked, his voice dropping. "He came at me aggressively." Harlan lied loud enough for the cameras to pick up the audio, though he knew the video in this room had been glitchy for months. "I feared for my life." Marcus spoke then, his voice cutting through the room like a razor. "I requested you allow the funeral to proceed. You drew a weapon on unarmed civilians. I surrendered immediately. There was no assault." "Shut up!" Harlan slammed his hand on the table. "You speak when spoken to. Strip!" Marcus stared at him. "Excuse me?" "Strip search," Harlan grinned. "Standard procedure for assault suspects, checking for hidden weapons." It was a power play. Pure and simple. There was no reason to strip search a man arrested at a funeral who had been handcuffed for 20 minutes. "Officer Harlan," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "I am a senior officer of the United States Army. If you proceed with this, you will be violating the Geneva Convention protocols regarding the treatment of detained officers, not to mention federal laws regarding civil rights violations. I strongly advise you to reconsider." "We ain't in Geneva, boy," Harlan sneered. "Okay, we're in Georgia. Take off the jacket." Marcus took a breath. He removed his jacket, then his shoes. Harlan humiliated him piece by piece, making comments about his clothes, his body, his race. Marcus endured it with a stoicism that was terrifying to behold. He retreated into his mind, into the training zone that had allowed him to survive interrogation simulations that would break a normal man in minutes. Finally, dressed in an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too small, Marcus was allowed his phone call. Harlan handed him the receiver of the wall phone, leaning against the wall with a smug grin. "Make it count. Call your lawyer. Tell him to bring a lot of cash." Marcus didn't call a lawyer. He dialed a number from memory, a number that didn't go to a law firm but to a secure operations center in Arlington, Virginia. "Command Center, Colonel Grant speaking." A crisp voice answered on the first ring. "Grant, this is Vale. Authorization code Sierra Tango 79er Bravo." There was a pause on the line. The tone of the voice on the other end shifted instantly from professional to alert. Code verified. General, what is your status? We received a silent panic signal from your FOB 22 minutes ago. We have been trying to triangulate. I am currently detained at the Redwood Creek Police Department, Georgia, Marcus said, his eyes locking with Harlan's. I have been arrested by a local officer. Badge number 402. Name Harlan. Hostile extraction. Weapon pointed at a seated high-value target. Current status in custody, unharmed. But the situation is volatile. Harlan frowned. Who are you talking to? Marcus ignored him. Grant, listen to me. My wife and mother are at the Oak Haven Cemetery. They are unsecured. That is your priority. Secure the family first. Then get down here and bring the JAG. I want this done by the book, but I want the book thrown so hard it leaves a crater. Understood, General. We are moving. Sit tight. Grant out. Marcus hung up the phone. He turned to Harlan. You have about 45 minutes, Marcus said. For what? Harlan asked, feeling a sudden chill despite the humidity. To write your resignation letter. Chief Donovan Hale walked into the station 10 minutes later, holding a half-eaten donut and looking annoyed. He was a man who liked a quiet life. He liked his corruption subtle, a fixed ticket here, an overlooked permit there. He didn't like noise. What is all the racket about, Vance? Hale asked, wiping sugar off his mustache. I could hear you yelling from the parking lot. Just processing a troublemaker, Chief, Harlan said, relaxing now that his brother-in-law was here. Guy at the Vale funeral. Got rowdy. Vale? Hale paused. He knew the Vales. Good family. Quiet. Which one? The brother, Marcus. Harlan gestured to the holding cell where Marcus sat on a metal bench meditating. Hale walked over to the desk and picked up the arrest report. He scanned it. Assault. Riot. He picked up the ID card Riggs had left on the desk. Hale's face went the color of old oatmeal. He looked at the ID, then at the cell, then at Harlan. Vance, Hale whispered. Did you read this? Yeah, says Major General. So what? You idiot, Hale hissed, grabbing Harlan by the arm and dragging him into his office. He slammed the door. That is a 2-star general. Do you know who Marcus Vale is? He's not just in the Army. I saw him on CNN last month standing next to the Secretary of Defense. He runs logistics for the entire eastern seaboard. He disobeyed a lawful order, Harlan defended himself, though his voice wavered. What order? Hale screamed. To stop burying his brother? Are you out of your mind? Please tell me you didn't draw your weapon. Harlan looked at his shoes. Oh, sweet Jesus. Hale rubbed his face. You drew on a general at a funeral. The phone on Hale's desk rang. It was a harsh, jarring sound. Hale stared at it. It rang again. He picked it up. Chief Hale, he said, his voice trembling. Chief Hale, a woman's voice said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. This is Governor Kemp's Chief of Staff. Please hold for the governor. Hale's knees almost gave out. He sat down heavily in his chair. He looked at Harlan and mouthed, The governor? Chief Hale? The governor's voice boomed down the line. I have the Secretary of the Army on the other line. He is screaming at me because one of your deputies has arrested one of his generals. Tell me this is a mistake. Tell me you are driving General Vale back to his family right now with a police escort and an apology. Governor, we are looking into the details, Hale stammered. The officer alleges assault. I don't care what your officer alleges, the governor shouted. I have seen the satellite thermal imaging. The Army is tracking him. They know he was prone on the ground. Fix this, Hale, or I will come down there personally and take your badge. The line went dead. Hale stared at the phone. Unlock him, he said to Harlan. Unlock him right now. Get him his clothes. Apologize. Kiss his boots if you have to, but do it." Harlan scrambled out of the office. He grabbed the keys and ran to the holding cell. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't get the key in the lock. Marcus watched him unblinking. "Change of plans," Harlan muttered, finally unlocking the door. "Chief says you can go. Just sign this release form saying you won't sue." Marcus stood up slowly. He didn't step out of the cell. "No," Marcus said. Harlan froze. "What?" "I said no," Marcus repeated. "I have been processed. I have been booked. My rights have been violated. I am not leaving until I speak to my counsel." "You can go," Harlan pleaded. "Just go. We're dropping the charges." "You can't unring a bell, officer," Marcus said. "You wanted me in the system. I'm in the system. Now we finish it." At that moment, the sound of rotors cut through the air. It started as a thrumming vibration in the floorboards and grew into a roar that rattled the windows in their frames. "What is that?" Riggs asked, standing up from his desk. Outside, dust kicked up in the parking lot as a black helicopter banked sharply and hovered over the station. It didn't land. There wasn't room. But 3 black SUVs tore into the parking lot, tires screeching, drifting into tactical positions that blocked the station's exit. Doors flew open. Men in suits didn't step out. Soldiers did. These weren't local National Guard. These were military police from the nearest base, accompanied by men in plain clothes with earpieces. They moved with a fluidity and violence of action that made the local cops look like children playing dress-up. The front door of the police station burst open. "Federal agents, nobody move." 6 men stormed the lobby. They wore FBI windbreakers over suits. Behind them walked a tall, severe-looking man in an Army service uniform, the chest covered in ribbons. Colonel Grant. Chief Donovan Hale stumbled out of his office, hands raised. "Don't shoot. We're police." "You're under federal investigation," Colonel Grant barked. "Where is the general?" Marcus stepped out of the holding cell, still wearing the orange jumpsuit. He looked at Grant. "Here, Colonel." Grant's face softened for a fraction of a second, then hardened into granite. He looked at Harlan, who was cowering by the cell door. "Is this the man?" Grant asked, pointing a gloved finger at Harlan. "That's him," Marcus said. Grant turned to the FBI agents. "Secure the evidence. I want the dash cam, the body cam, the booking logs, and the phone records. Seize it all." "You can't do this," Harlan shouted, finding a scrap of his old bravado. "This is state jurisdiction." One of the FBI agents, a man named Special Agent Carter, stepped forward. He held up a warrant. Title 18, U.S. Code, Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law. And since you pointed a loaded firearm at a high-ranking military official during a time of heightened national alert, we're tacking on federal assault and endangerment of a protected official. You are way out of your league, officer. Agent Carter pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Vance Harlan, you are under arrest." Harlan looked at Hale for help. "Chief, do something." Hale turned his back. "I told you to let him go, Vance. You're on your own." As Harlan was shoved against the wall, the very same wall he had leaned against while mocking Marcus, Marcus walked past him. "Colonel," Marcus said, "I need my clothes." "Yes, General. We have a change of uniform in the SUV." Marcus stopped and looked at Harlan, whose face was pressed against the drywall. "Officer Harlan," Marcus said quietly, "you asked me if I thought I could bench press my way out of this. No. I prefer to use the weight of the law. It's much heavier." Harlan was hauled away, kicking and screaming out the front door into the view of the gathering crowd and the news cameras that had just arrived. The hard karma had just begun. But the twists were far from over. Harlan thought he was just going to jail. He didn't know that his past was about to be dug up, skeleton by skeleton. The downfall of Vance Harlan did not happen all at once. It was a slow, agonizing peeling away of every layer of protection he thought he possessed. It began in the interrogation room of the FBI field office in Atlanta, a sterile white box that hummed with the sound of high-powered air conditioning, a stark contrast to the humid, muddy reality of the Redwood Creek cemetery. Special Agent Carter sat across from Harlan. There was no good cop, bad cop routine here. There was only cop and felon. "You have a right to remain silent," Carter said, sliding a glass of water across the metal table. "But I think we're past that. Your brother-in-law, Chief Hale, he's singing Vance. He's singing like a canary to keep his pension." Harlan, stripped of his uniform and wearing federal detention gray, looked smaller. The ruddy complexion was gone, replaced by a pasty, clammy sweat. "Hale is a liar. He approved every stop I made." "He says you kept a personal log," Carter said, tapping a manila folder. "He says you kept trophies in a lockbox at your hunting cabin. We have a search warrant for that cabin executing right now." Harlan flinched. It was a microscopic movement, a twitch of the left eye. But to a trained investigator like Carter, it was a confession. The hard karma wasn't just about the general anymore. The investigation into the assault on Marcus Vale had opened a Pandora's box. When the FBI seized the servers at the Redwood Creek precinct, they didn't just find the deleted footage of the funeral encounter. They found a pattern. For years, Harlan had been terrorizing the minority population of the county. But he had been careful. He targeted people who wouldn't fight back. Undocumented immigrants, teenagers with records, the poor. He thought he was hunting sheep. He never imagined he would wake up a sleeping dragon. Back in Redwood Creek, the town was in turmoil. The news vans were parked 3 deep along Main Street. Reporters from CNN, Fox, and MSNBC were doing stand-ups in front of the diner, interviewing locals. The narrative was shifting rapidly. At first, some locals tried to defend Harlan as tough on crime. But then the videos started leaking. A brave young IT specialist named Kevin, who had worked at the station and been fired by Harlan for insubordination, had kept backups. He contacted General Vale's legal team. On the 3rd day of the investigation, the story took a darker twist. Major General Marcus Vale sat in a temporary command post set up in a hotel conference room. He was looking at a laptop screen, his face grim. Beside him was Lena, her hand resting on his shoulder. "You need to see this, General," said the lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Beatrice Cole. She played a video file. It was dash cam footage from years prior. It showed a rainy night on a back road. Harlan's cruiser was pulled over behind a beat-up sedan. A young man was on his knees in the mud, much like Marcus had been. The man was pleading. "Please, officer, I'm just going to my night shift at the plant. I didn't run that stop sign. You look like you match a description." Harlan's voice sneered from off-camera. Then the video glitched. 5 minutes of footage were missing. When it resumed, the young man was unconscious in the back of the cruiser, his face swollen. The official report said the man had fallen while running away. "That man," Beatrice said, pointing to the screen, "was named Leo King. He died in custody 2 days later from a cerebral hemorrhage. The coroner ruled it accidental. The coroner is also Chief Hale's cousin." Marcus closed his eyes. He felt a rage that burned hotter than the anger he felt for his own mistreatment. "He killed him. He beat that boy to death and covered it up." "We think so," Beatrice said, "but we need proof. We need the missing 5 minutes." "The trophy box," Marcus said, opening his eyes. "The agent said he kept trophies." 2 hours later, Agent Carter called. They had found the box under the floorboards of Harlan's hunting cabin. Inside, they found driver's licenses of victims, jewelry, and in a twist that sickened even the hardened agents, SD cards. Harlan had recorded them. He had recorded the beatings on his personal body cam, the one he wasn't supposed to wear to rewatch later. He was not just a racist cop. He was a sadist, and he had kept the evidence of his own murder. The charge against Vance Harlan was upgraded. It was no longer just assault on a federal officer. It was deprivation of rights under color of law resulting in death. It was a capital offense. The twisting knife of karma had found its mark. Harlan had pointed a gun at Marcus to humiliate him, to feel powerful. Instead, that act had shone a spotlight so bright it illuminated the skeletons he had buried years ago. If he had just let the funeral proceed, he would have retired with a pension. Now he was looking at the needle. The trial of the United States versus Vance Harlan did not take place in Redwood Creek. The venue was moved to the federal courthouse in Atlanta to ensure an impartial jury. Though finding anyone who hadn't seen the viral video of the general face down in the mud was nearly impossible, the courtroom was packed. The gallery was a sea of military uniforms, soldiers from Marcus's command who had taken leave to sit in silent support, and the families of Harlan's previous victims finally seeing a glimmer of hope. The prosecutor was a man named Thomas Wright, a legendary figure in the Department of Justice known as the Shark. He didn't pace. He stalked. Harlan sat at the defense table looking like a ghost. He had lost 30 pounds. His wife had filed for divorce the day the Leo King tape was played on national television. She had taken the kids and moved to Montana. He was alone. His defense attorney, a court-appointed lawyer named Samuel Reed, looked exhausted. He knew he was fighting a losing battle. His only strategy was to plead for life in prison over the death penalty, painting Harlan as a man under extreme stress, suffering from undiagnosed PTSD. PTSD? Wright mocked during his opening statement. PTSD from what? From terrorizing a high school teacher? From beating a factory worker to death? No, ladies and gentlemen. Vance Harlan does not suffer from stress. He suffers from a God complex. And on the day he met General Vale, he simply met a God he couldn't bully. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Witness after witness took the stand. First, the neighbors who Harlan claimed had called in the noise complainant. An elderly woman named Mrs. Gable took the stand. "Did you call the police on the day of the funeral, Mrs. Gable?" Wright asked. "No, sir," she said, clutching her purse. "I was watching Jeopardy. I didn't hear a thing. Officer Harlan came to my house the next day. He told me if anyone asked, I should say I called. He said if I didn't, he'd find a reason to condemn my septic tank." The jury gasped. The coercion was naked and undeniable. Then came the experts, the forensic analyst who walked the jury through the recovered SD card footage. The courtroom was silent as the video of Leo King played. It was brutal, unflinching. The sound of the baton striking flesh echoed off the mahogany walls. Harlan refused to look at the screen. He stared at his hands. Finally, the prosecution called their star witness, Major General Marcus Vale. Marcus walked to the stand with the same dignity he had shown at the grave. He was in full dress uniform now, the rows of ribbons on his chest telling a story of sacrifice and honor. He took the oath. "General," Wright asked softly, "can you tell the jury what went through your mind when the defendant pointed his weapon at you?" Marcus looked directly at Harlan. Harlan tried to look away but couldn't. "I wasn't thinking about myself," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I have faced death before. I have been shot at in Kandahar and Baghdad. I accept the risk of my profession, but that day, I looked at my mother. She is 78 years old. She's buried a husband and a son. I thought, if this man kills me in front of her, it will kill her too. Marcus paused, letting the weight of the words settle. I thought about the young students watching. I thought about what it would teach them. That no matter how hard you work, no matter how much you serve your country, you are only one bad cop away from being a body in the mud. And did you provoke him? I asked him to let me bury my brother. Did you resist? I surrendered. I knelt. I lay down in the dirt. Wright turned to the jury. He lay down in the dirt, a man who commands 10,000 soldiers, a man who defends our freedom. He lay down in the dirt to save his family from a man with a badge and a grudge. The defense tried to cross-examine, but it was futile. Reed asked if Marcus's tone had been insubordinate. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Insubordinate? I am a Major General. Officer Harlan is a patrolman. If we are speaking strictly of rank and chain of command, he was the one who was grossly insubordinate. A ripple of laughter went through the gallery. The judge banged the gavel, but he was hiding a smile. The verdict was swift. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Count 1, assault with a deadly weapon. Count 2, deprivation of civil rights. Count 3, obstruction of justice. Count 4, second-degree murder for the death of Leo King. When the foreman read the guilty verdict for the murder charge, a wail went up from the back of the room. It was Leo King's mother. She collapsed into the arms of Lena Vohel. The two women held each other, one who had almost lost a son and one who had. The sentencing phase was where the hard karma truly solidified. The judge, Honorable Robert Sterling, looked over his glasses at the disgraced officer. Vance Harlan, you have disgraced your uniform. You have disgraced this state. You treated the law as your personal weapon. You sought to destroy General Vale because his dignity offended your ego. But in doing so, you revealed your own monstrosity. The judge leaned forward. The prosecution has asked for the death penalty, and frankly, the law supports it. But I am not going to give you the easy way out. I am not going to let you be a martyr for some twisted cause. I am sentencing you to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole, and I am recommending that you be housed in the general population of USP Atlanta. Harlan's eyes widened in horror. USP Atlanta. It was a high-security facility. It was filled with gang members, many of whom had been put there by cops like him. But worse, it was filled with people who had watched the news. They knew who he was. They knew what he had done to a black general and a helpless kid. You wanted to be a tough guy, Mr. Harlan, the judge said, slamming the gavel. Now you're going to be in a cage with the real tough guys. May God have mercy on your soul, because the yard certainly won't. As the bailiff shackled Harlan, he looked back at the gallery. He looked for a friendly face. There were none. Chief Hale had already resigned and moved to Florida in shame. His wife was gone. His eyes met Marcus's one last time. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply nodded, a slow, solemn acknowledgement that the balance had been restored. He stood up, adjusted his uniform jacket, and turned his back on Vance Harlan forever. Time moves differently in two places, inside a prison cell and at the graveside of a loved one. For Vance Harlan, time had become a suffocating blanket of gray. He was housed in USP Atlanta, just as the judge had recommended. He wasn't in general population immediately. The warden knew that a cop in Gen Pop was a death sentence, and the state needed him alive to testify in the ongoing corruption trials against other officers. So Harlan lived in administrative segregation, 23 hours a day in a concrete box the size of a parking space. He had no window. He had no badge. He had no name. Only a number, 89402-0019. The hard karma wasn't violent in the way he had expected. It was psychological. It was the crushing realization that the world had moved on without him, and worse, that the world was better without him. Every time his lawyer visited, which was rare as the money had run out, Harlan would ask about the town. "How's Redwood Creek? Bet it's going to hell without me keeping the peace." The lawyer would just shake his head. "Crime is down 40%, Vance. The new chief, a woman named Chief Patterson, implemented community policing. People actually talk to the cops now. They aren't scared." That hurt more than a beating. The realization that he wasn't the dam holding back the flood. He was the pollution poisoning the water. Meanwhile, on the outside, the Vale King Act was winding its way through the state legislature. Named after Major General Marcus Vale and the late Leo King, the bill mandated body cameras for all rural officers with footage uploaded directly to an independent state server that local chiefs couldn't delete. It was a massive victory for civil rights, born from the tragedy of a funeral and the bravery of a brother. 5 years after that rainy day in the cemetery, Major General Marcus Vale retired. The ceremony was held at the Pentagon. There were flags, a band, and speeches by senators. But Marcus's mind wasn't on the pomp and circumstance. He was thinking about a promise he had made. The day after his retirement, Marcus drove back to Redwood Creek. He wasn't in a rush this time. He drove his own truck, a simple Ford, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. He looked like any other man, not a titan of the military. He pulled up to the gates of Oak Haven Cemetery. It wasn't raining this time. The Georgia sun was golden and warm, filtering through the Spanish moss. Marcus walked to his brother's grave. The grass had grown in thick and green. The headstone was clean. "Hey, little brother," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's been a while. I've been busy cleaning up a mess." He placed a single white rose on the stone. "You know," Marcus continued, speaking to the air, "I spent 30 years fighting enemies abroad. I thought the war was over there. I never realized the biggest fight would be right here in the mud in our hometown. But we won, Elias. We won. That man, he won't hurt anyone ever again. And Leo King's mom, she used the settlement money to open a legal aid clinic right on Main Street. They named the library after you, Elias. The Elias Vale Center for History and Justice." Marcus stood up. He felt lighter. The weight he had carried since that day, the anger, the indignation, the fear for his family, had finally lifted. He had turned a moment of ultimate disrespect into a legacy of protection for thousands of others. As he walked back to his truck, he saw a police cruiser slowly driving down the road. Marcus tensed instinctively, a ghost of the old trauma flaring up. The cruiser slowed down. It stopped. A young officer stepped out. He was white, young, maybe 22. He took off his hat. "General Vale?" the young officer asked. Marcus nodded, ready for anything. "That's me." The officer stood at attention and saluted. A crisp, respectful salute. "I just wanted to say thank you, sir," the officer said nervously. "I took the job last year. Because of the new laws, because of what you did, I can actually be the kind of cop I wanted to be. We aren't bullies anymore. We're guardians." Marcus looked at the young man. He saw sincerity. He saw hope. Marcus returned the salute, slow, precise. "Carry on, officer," Marcus said. "Yes, sir." The officer got back in his car and drove away, strictly obeying the speed limit. Marcus watched him go. The cycle had been broken. The karma had come full circle, punishing the wicked, but more importantly, healing the wound. Marcus got into his truck. He started the engine, put on some old Sam Cooke, and drove home to his wife. The war was finally over, and that is the story of how one man's arrogance became his own undoing. Vance Harlan thought he was the law, but he forgot that the law is meant to protect, not to oppress. He thought he could bury the truth in the mud along with the grieving family, but he didn't know he was standing in the shadow of a giant. General Vale didn't use violence to win. He used the very system Harlan tried to weaponize. He showed us that true power isn't about a badge or a gun. It's about character, discipline, and the courage to stand your ground when the world tries to force you to your knees. Harlan is serving life. But the real ending of this story is the freedom he inadvertently helped create for everyone else in that town. Karma doesn't just punish. Sometimes it cleans house. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who needs to see karma in action. And hit subscribe so you never miss a new episode. Thanks for watching.